Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everybody. It's my great pleasure to be here with you in this important event. Thanks for the kind invitation, Dr. Ahmed and the chairs of the organizing committee. I'll be talking about Islamic ethics and genomics. Genomics is an important chapter of the history of modern science, and it was compared to landing on the moon and splitting the atom and all this stuff. And so was it also for the field of ethics and bioethics in particular. For bioethics, usually bioethicists would come on board and get invited to give their insights after science. So the scientists start. Once we have problems, we have dilemmas and difficulties, then bioethicists would come to see what to do with these problems. This is what has happened throughout history up to the moment of 1990 when we had the start of the Human Genome Project. Those who were responsible for the project, including James Watson and the others, they realized that we will have ethical problems. We don't have to wait for this. So they started the ethical component of the project parallel to the scientific. So we had the program, Ethical, Legal, and Social Implications, the ELSI program, which started concurrently with the scientific problem. And since then, we have this whole field of genomics and Islamic ethics. So we knew from day one that this, at this time, emerging field of genomics would raise ethical problems, deep ones. Many of them are precedented in nature because we have also more or less new science and new scientific activity. So we had to do something about ethics. This question, how to manage this field through our own moral world, was a question to the people in the United States, was a question to people in Europe, and was a question to people everywhere who are interested to be part of the incoming and the forthcoming genomic revolution. And Muslims were no exception in this regard, and the Islamic tradition was no exception in this regard. Okay. My talk today is based on some of the work I have done already as part of my teaching this course, Islamic Bioethics, which I teach in my university. But it will not be identical to what I do with my students because they have background in Islamic studies. We will start with some introductory remarks. I already started some of these introductory remarks. And then I speak about the Islamic bioethical deliberations related to genomics in particular, and then concluding remarks. As I said, genomics was unique in the history of science, but not only in the history of science, also in the history of bioethics. Why is this the case? From a biomedical perspective, we used to approach human body this way. I always say to my students, we used to look at the human body as a printed E4. We have a document printed on E4 with letters, and these letters have paragraphs. These paragraphs have sentences. These sentences have words, and then we have letters, etc. When we have a mistake in a specific word, like for instance, I go to school, and I see go OZ. So the Z is wrong. So what I do, I take the pen and I delete the Z. The problem is that whenever I print the document again, it will appear I goes to school again. Why? Because I'm working on the printed version. We used to work on the human body as a printed version. We look at our phenotype. We have hands, arms, nose, ears, foot, legs, etc., etc., and we look at them. By time, we could get inside the body a little bit through dissection, usually after the death of the human being. By time we could penetrate into the human body while the person is living through X-rays, etc. But still, it's a printed document, and we try to deal with it. So we try to fix what we see. By time, we realize that there is a digital version, like this printed E4. It has its original copy is not the printed one. It's somewhere on a computer, locked there. And we could unlock this file of our human body, the digital one. So we tried to see our bodies as a bunch of ACTGs. And all what we see phenotypically is programmed through these ACTGs. And if we want to fix I goes to school by deleting the Z and not to appear anymore whenever we print this one, we go to the file and fix it on the computer. So when we print it, it will not be there anymore. This is what we know now, thinking about gene editing and gene therapy and all this stuff. So there was a big change from an ethical perspective of how we look at the human body. Of course, looking at the human body as a software, we started to get access to unprecedented amount of knowledge. It's unbelievable. So if I have a cardiac condition and I do genome sequencing to know the underlying genetic reasons for this, I will get into what we call now Book of Life. I will get access not only to the gene mutations possibly responsible for this condition, but I will get access to everything. How to do ethical management of this information? How much information should biomedical scientists have to this huge book consisting of billions of letters? And who should have access to this information? And the one who has access, how much information? And when I have this information, should I tell all information to the patients or research participants, what we call return of results? What if I came across results that I was not looking for as a researcher, that he or she, the research participant or the patient, was not looking for, what we call incidental findings? Should I tell them? Not. What if these incidental findings or return of results concern not only this person, but a whole family around and behind? Should we tell this also to the others or not? Very difficult questions related to the ethical management of information, and then the ethical management of action. When we approach human body as a software version, what we can do is much more that we could do on the printed version. We can now not only fix what's going wrong about us. It's not that we have a disease and we try to treat the disease. Through access to the software, we can edit ourselves, literally, as we edit the documents, the Word documents, that there is a sentence, there is no grammatical mistake, but I can make it better. I can improve the language. I can make it look fantastic, not just right, linguistically speaking. Can we do that also with the human body? Can we use these new technologies of gene editing and genetic intervention and all this stuff to make ourselves the best that we can, not only that we are okay, but the best that we can? This is what we usually call in bioethics enhancement. And usually we make in bioethics distinction between treatment on one hand, tadawi as we call it in Arabic, and enhancement on the other hand. With the coming of genetics, we started to have blurred lines between what is medical treatment and what is enhancement. If I'm not happy with how my nose looks like, I get depressed because how my nose looks. I want to have my nose looks like Tom Cruise or I don't know what. If I don't this, I will feel I'm sick. And we can fix that. Should we do that? Shouldn't we do that? What about the forthcoming generations? If we do the germline editing, not just the editing at the level of adult cells, but germline, these coming generations, we did not consent them. We did not ask them what they like and what they dislike. Can we decide for them? And when we decide for them, at least with the current state of science that we now have, it will be fixed for good. They cannot repair this later on, because this 8 cells will be in billions of cells later on that we cannot fix everywhere. So we can do much more that we could, but how far we should go? All these made, of course, the need to have a field that we call ethics of genomics. The Islamic tradition, as a world religion, was faced with the same question. What would Islam say about this? If I am a patient, or if I am a research participant, or if I am a scientist, or if I am a government, a country, and I want to regulate the field in a way that will not bring backlash from society, what's possible and what's not possible? These discussions, as I mentioned, the questions were quite complex. Throughout history in Islam, usually I have a question, a dilemma. As an individual Muslim, I go to an individual religious scholar, and gives me an answer. And then I think about it, I'm satisfied, I'm not satisfied. I go to another scholar, I don't go, and then I decide myself according to my conscience. With the coming of genomics, this conventional and traditional way will not work anymore, because religious scholars are trained in religious sciences, al-ulum shar'iyya as we call it. So they don't know what genomics is. What's the difference between genetics and genomics, all this. When I myself started this, I was in this situation. So you need to be educated about what are these questions. If I ask any person, what do you think about X? If you don't know what X is, you cannot answer the question. So they needed help. So there were interdisciplinary discussions where biomedical scientists, together and in collaboration with the religious scholars, had to collaborate. So we had interdisciplinary discussions. In the Muslim world, so far, we don't have this genre of bioethicists that we have in the West. So we don't have these chairs of, my position is Professor of Islam and Biomedical Ethics. But if you search, you will not find this position. It's not common anyhow. Maybe you find another one or two. We don't have these chairs and things of Islamic bioethics as we have them in the West. So it's usually religious scholars. Things are moving, of course. But in order to answer the question, we must have had these interdisciplinary discussions. These interdisciplinary discussions were institutionalized by the beginning of the 80s, before genomics. Muslims had problems about bioethical questions, about IVF problems, about stem cell research, about organ transplantation, all this stuff. And they had the same problem. Religious scholars alone cannot answer the question. So they need to collaborate with biomedical scientists. Institutions were established to address this problem in a consistent way through institutions. The most active institution in this is the Islamic Organization for Medical Sciences, the one established in Kuwait, and it collaborates with two other important institutions, the Islamic Fiqh Academy in Mecca and the International Islamic Fiqh Academy in Jeddah. Fiqh, it means Islamic jurisprudence or Islamic law. So these institutions are transnational. So they are based in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, but they are not Kuwaiti or Saudi Arabian institutions. They are Islamic institutions. For instance, a country like United Arab Emirates, like Qatar, like Kuwait, Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey, they are all represented in these institutions. And by the way, also trans school, so the Sunni, the Shia, the Ibadi, they are all represented there. But of course, a dominant Sunni majority and also dominant Arab world. They discussed the issues related to genomics through this interdisciplinary approach. At least 15 meetings and conferences between the period 1993 and 2013. So 15 meetings is a large number. You can know, for instance, for cloning, human cloning, it was 2 conferences. For IVF, because it was one of the early topics, it was like 4 or 5. So 15 is a quite large number to come to a conclusion in 2013. And of course, also the span, the period was quite long. These are the published proceedings of one of the very first, these interdisciplinary discussions that I am aware of. This was a conference held in February 1993 in Qatar, published in both Arabic and English. And it is 1993. The Human Genome Project started 1990. So you can see, and they spoke about the Human Genome Project throughout the conference and mentioned also in the final recommendations of the conference, etc. So this was more or less like a start. Just a couple of years after the launch of the Human Genome Project, they started to say, as a Muslim world, how should we think about this now? Other important conferences came later on, like this conference from the organization in Kuwait, 1998. This is one of the most important and influential conferences. It's titled in English, Genetics, Genetic Engineering, Human Genome and Gene Therapy, an Islamic Perspective. A couple of years later, in 2006, they discussed more or less the same issues, but not only within the Islamic perspective, but in a multi-cultural, multi-religious way. So they involved religious perspectives, like Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, etc., also secular perspectives. Between 1993 and 2013, the big question was, should we as Muslims, individuals, scientists, research participants, etc., or as governments, join the genomic revolution, this new thing in the 90s? Should we join or not? And we had two main difference of opinion, as we usually have in the field of ethics and bioethics in particular. We have this famous joke: if you have an ethics committee, if you have 3 members of ethics committee, you will end up with 4 opinions. They are very good in disagreeing with each other. So we had this difference of opinion. Some were not so enthusiastic about joining the genomic revolution. Others were quite enthusiastic about this. I will those who disagreed, or because of the time limit, let's speak about the proactive approach. Those who said that we have to join. This ended up to be the mainstream position, the dominant majority, and this what was implemented by the governments in the Muslim world, as we are here now in United Arab Emirates speaking about details of the genomics. They said genomics is a part of man's long journey to know oneself, the creation around, and the God who created both the human being and the universe. So there is actually, ethically speaking, nothing new, nothing strange, nothing weird, not even to say nothing controversial about it. We have been trying to know ourselves more and more, sometimes through philosophy, sometimes through scientific experiments, and now it happened through genomics. Also, we have the concept of higher objectives of Sharia. You are aware in science, you have to set the goals. You must have goals beforehand in order to be able to evaluate what you have done. So there are also higher objectives of Sharia. God revealed religions to humans so that they can achieve something, and at the end of which they can realize if they were good or not. This is what we call higher objectives of Sharia. One of these objectives is that we safeguard lives, human lives, we protect human lives, not to kill each other all the way, and to protect offspring, to have healthy, good, well-educated children in the future. They said genomics is serving and contributing to these two higher objectives of Sharia. So in this regard, it must be judged as something good. Also, when we speak about the benefit-harm assessment, those from the other approach in the minority who were quite cautious in the beginning, they said that there are so many risks involved in genomics, especially in the 1990s. It was a new field. These scholars said almost everything in this life is composed of inseparably mix of benefits and harms. There is nothing, if you think very rationally and materialistically, there is almost nothing which is purely beneficial or purely harmful. It's always a mix. The art is how to balance benefit-harm management, and by maximizing the benefits and minimizing the harms. That's it. So the question when it comes to genomics, do we have inherent risks that once we get involved in genomics, we will have them and we can never get rid of them? We said we don't have this because it's a scientific enterprise that can lead to good results, that can lead to negative results. And there are benefits, huge benefits. They spoke about the potential for treating diseases, et cetera, the predictability of disease, pharmacogenomics, oncogenomics, all these things. And they said when it comes to the benefits, in Islam, we call things like necessities, things like luxuries. The benefits that will come from genomics, they said when it comes to treating these untreatable diseases and all this stuff, it's part of the necessities in life. We are not speaking about luxuries. About the harms, they said most of the time they are always avoidable or controllable through the so-called dawabit shar'iyya, as we call it in Arabic, sharia-based safeguards, like the ethical standards that you do for any scientific practice in order to make sure, as we do in the IRBs, in institutional review boards, you make sure that the risks are kept to the minimum and they are justified. They said, we just add to this that harm is not only a scientific or medical harm, but it can be a religious one as well. For the relationship between science and religion, some of those who were afraid of joining the genomic revolution, they said that science now is divorced from religion. The big scientists, the leaders in fields like genomics, genetics, cardiac diseases, all this stuff, they are not religious people. And even if they are religious, religion is not playing a role in their scientific enterprise. These people are not afraid of God. So they can do anything in order to be famous. So how can we, as religious scholars sitting now in Kuwait or in Jeddah or in Mecca, make sure that the scientific enterprise in Silicon Valley will be compliant with Sharia? We cannot do that. So there is a great risk for what's going on. They said maybe science is divorced from religion in the modern time. That's true. So it's secular, but it's not necessarily anti-religious. These people are not against the religion, and more importantly, not necessarily unethical. So these people are not committed to belief in God, but they are committed to ethical principles, professional standards, etc. And when it comes to genomics in particular, they spoke about the famous example of Francis Collins, who was the director of the second director of the Human Genome Project, who wrote a book after the completion of the project, Language of God, in which he spoke about his journey with genomics. And he felt it not only a scientific journey, but a religious one that made him more believing, etc. By the way, Francis Collins became a believer when he was at the university, before leading the Human Genome Project. So they spoke about a good example for a Muslim, of genomics. A role for Muslims, do we have a role as Muslims to play? Should we be part? Shouldn't we be part? They said it's not a matter of should we or shouldn't we. It's an obligation for Muslims to be part of this. They spoke about the deplorable state of science, especially when they were talking in the 90s. And they said this is a great opportunity for Muslims to join that, to improve this deplorable situation. And this is a great opportunity that we shouldn't lose. So besides the theological framing, that this is a journey to know oneself when's universe, when's the creator, how things have been made through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc. So they came up to a conclusion, all these discussions, that we have to join. It's not an option. It's not a matter of permissibility. It's a matter of obligation. There is a piece that I have written for the Omnia magazine in which you will find details, more details about this, what I talked about today. But what I want to say is that there is diversity of opinions within the Islamic tradition. We had this especially in the beginning of the discussions. By time, the proactive approach, the approach that is we have to proactively contribute to the genomics, had the winning thesis. It was also practiced in reality. So by the end of 2013, the Saudi Human Genome Project started, the Qatari Human Genome Project started, other national genome projects started in other countries later on. And the question started to be not should we join, shouldn't we join, is it permissible, is it obligation, but started to be how to manage the whole field of genomics. So there were questions about the return of results, how to manage this, especially when it comes to incidental findings, about the patents and the financial return from this, how to be distributed, how to be done. About the data sharing that I spoke about in my question in the previous session, about how to manage the informed consent when it comes to genomics. You consent people about stuff that you may do in the future and you don't know what this will be. We don't know which genes will have the mutations that will have pathogenic implications, etc. How to consent the people when it comes to this stuff. Unfortunately, as it's always the case, time is running. This is for those who are interested to know more. This is one of the books that we recently published, Islamic Ethics and the Genome Question. The book is available for free. You can download it as PDF from the publisher, in which we discussed a wide range of detailed issues about genomics in the Islamic tradition. This is where you can find this book on internet. It goes back to the end of 2018. This is one of the papers or one of the studies we made for Qatar in particular, when they had the post-2013 questions, when they asked the question, what should we do? Now we have the Qatar Biobank and we have the Qatar Genome Program. How to manage, for instance, the incidental findings. So we made a study, available also in English and Arabic. You can download it from internet. We made it for the World Innovative Summit for Health, WISH, one of the institutions there in Qatar. And we discussed in detail about the ethical management of incidental findings. This is all what I had for the time being. If you have any questions later on, I'll be happy to comment on that, if I know the answer. Thank you so much.